You're now watching Haunt Talk with your host Scott from Exploring Attractions and Rob from the Howling Hour, home for all things scary and spooky related.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Haunt Talk podcast. My name is Scott from Exploring Attractions.
And I am Rob from the Howling Hour.
And today on episode 22, I believe it is, we have a guest all the way from Halloween Horror Nights. Tiffany, thank you for coming on the show.
Of course, anytime.
I'm excited to hear all the juicy goodness about HHN this year and last year. So kind of take us through how you got into the whole thing. What made you want to scare?
Yeah. This past year, 2024, was my 4th year at Halloween Horror Nights.
Nice.
My first year was in 2021. I graduated right when that beautiful pandemic hit. So
Oh, man.
my degree in theater kind of was a little, the plan was altered a little bit.
Up in the air.
And one of the first things that, like, gigs that I got an email that was reopening was Halloween Horror Nights, actually. And I'd never done it. I had only ever been to HHN once before as a guest, and I did not like it. I am a scaredy cat, actually. I am not very good when we go through the houses every year. I do scream. I do get a little frightened. So there wasn't a world where I thought I would do it, because I was like, wait, I'm going to be scared of myself. Like, I don't want to do it. But I was like, okay, I'll apply. Like, why not? Do the audition process. And I shockingly got it.
Nice.
So my first year, I was the Bride of Frankenstein in the Bride of Frankenstein Lives maze.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was so much fun. And I had an amazing cast, an amazing supervisor team, and the house was just so beautiful in every capacity that I just, like, fell in love with it. And I made so many friends. And when it came around for year 2, I was like, okay, I'll do it again. And I was making a really long commute at that time. I was driving all the way from a city called Redlands, which is like over an hour.
Yeah, that's far.
So I was like, is it really worth it? I don't know. Let's see. And my second year, I came back for La Llorona as La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. And that house ended up ranking number 1. That house was very scary. And once again, had a great time, loved it. And then every year I've been like, I don't think I'm going to do it again this year. Okay, I'll just reply. Okay, well, why not? So then my 3rd year, I returned as Bloody Beth in Evil Dead Rise.
Okay.
So we had a lot of chainsaws going on there, fake ones, unlike our amazing chainsaw performers that carry real ones. Still hurt, but it's cool. And then this last year actually was a little bit weird of a year. I was originally cast as Parker's mother in Insidious to start the season.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We did one press night in there, and then we had a little bit of a switch up where I would end up going to be Saskia Van Helsing in Eternal Bloodlines, Universal Monsters Maze, which was a little full circle from starting as the Bride of Frankenstein to now working alongside her. So, yeah, it was a pretty roundabout way, that one. But I've only ever been a house performer. I have performed in the streets during my La Llorona year, and street scaring and house scaring are very different in comparison. They're both equally as important, for sure.
Yeah, you got to stay active at all times.
Yeah.
And like you can, in a house, you can kind of like get out of character when you go back in your box, but in a zone, you have to be in character at all times.
Yeah, you're on for your 45 hours out there. Whereas they say in houses, it's a new show every 7 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of finding the perfect targets when you're a house actor. I want to say maze, but we're not called that anymore.
I know, gotta use the right terminology because apparently they want to be special like Orlando.
Exactly.
The haunted houses.
The haunted houses now. But
I still catch myself because if I drop it in like a YouTube video and I say maze, people will correct me, and I'm like, all right, guys.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, guys. It's
old habits die hard.
Yeah. It's like, come on, everything else is a maze, but this is a house.
Exactly.
All right? But it's kind of interesting. You started Bride of Frankenstein with obviously the pandemic year coming off the pandemic.
Yes.
That was one of my favorites. And then you went right into La Llorona, which is, I mean, 2012 was one of my all-time favorites. And then in 2022, I believe La Llorona was. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it's just not the same. And then towards the end of the year, I was kind of like, okay, it is the same. I love this house. So.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to start from the beginning there with Bride of Frankenstein. Like, what was the difficulties of like wearing a mask during performing?
It was a definite challenge because there were still scream tracks and still
Hmm.
audio tracks that were to follow.
Yeah.
And it was that house I have like such fond memories of because as not scary as I was in that maze, the bride often was the distraction or telling, like pushing the story along for the scares.
Hmm.
Even though we were wearing masks and you didn't get to see the full beautiful look of her that we know so well,
Yeah.
she was so open arms received by guests. I think that was a concern that we had wondered was like, will the mask have a play in it? Because it was a little bit of a challenge in terms of performing.
Hmm.
And I know for a lot of my friends who did mask roles that year, like the Dracula's brides, because of restrictions, they were expected to wear masks under their masks as well,
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
everyone's safety involved. Um, and I know that was I know that was a hard task to be able to have two layers of that breathing with the minimal visibility on top of everything else. But I thought it would be a little bit hard for people to connect because it wasn't the full look of her. But no, it was so well received, and we actually were able to do one night of the full face with the lipstick and everything
Oh, cool.
because we had a full face forehead prosthetic that would go down to the chin. It's the same one that they used in 2024, except like the
Okay.
flap would just be left off because it was under our mask. Nobody needed to see it. So it would
Oh,
be funny
cool.
on breaks, like people taking off their masks and it's just like their regular face from the bottom where they drink water.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, it was definitely hard. And I do think it was a great decision when John Murdy brought The Bride of Frankenstein back in 2023 for the Peacock photo op because it was the
yeah,
first
yeah.
time
Yeah.
guests really got to fully see her, especially in her burn state, which is only something that you see at HHN in the park. She doesn't have that because she hasn't
Hmm.
been exploded in the castle yet. But, it was definitely challenging. There were a lot of restrictions, especially when we started the season. It was a lot of restrictions of like even in the break rooms, we had to be separated for in the beginning of you need to be distancing from each other, and if you ever have your mask
Yeah.
off, you need to be following these protocols. And every year at HHN, something that is held pretty dearly in break spaces is like potlucks. And that year
Yeah.
was really challenging because everything had to be wrapped, everything was individual, everything was to make sure that everyone's safety was kept in mind. My memory serves me correct. We got pretty lucky. We did not really have any outbreaks in our house. Every
That's
season,
good.
somebody gets sick and it goes around a house like wildfire. Not even
Hmm.
just COVID, but like the flu.
Yeah.
But like people get sick and it spreads. That year, they were so like hyper precautious of it that it was. I don't think we had an outbreak like that. And even on the back end of
That's good.
our makeup team, they made sure we were only in contact with one artist. Like every year when I've done Horror Nights past host, you go to whatever chair is open, you get your makeup done, and you go. But that
Mhm.
year we were very precautious of like, okay, Jessica is your artist. You're gonna sit with her because like it's gonna minimize the amount of contact you have with people. Um,
Yeah.
I think probably one of the hardest challenges was watching the guests that year because I think people often forget that their houses are full of cameras and they would like pull their masks down and or just not wear them, which was a little hard because it was like this is for both of our safeties.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially like when guests blow their vapes in your face, it's like simmer down,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
It's like, first of all, don't do that at all. Second of all, it's a
Yeah.
COVID
Exactly.
year.
Yeah, especially in a pandemic. Thank you so much.
Uh,
But it was definitely unlike any other year that I've experienced. However, I think that year was such a dream that that's the season that made me fall in love with it. Like my second year was a little bit harder of a year on me, and I
Hmm.
think I
Okay.
just kept thinking back to like I know how great this is. I know how amazing this is to tell this story and be a part of something so extremely cool that it kind of was like the starting force for my HHN experience.
And you were successful when it was at its lowest. So that's
Yeah,
like even more important to remind yourself, if it gets hard, you're like, okay, well, I was at the lowest, like when we had to wear
exactly.
masks. So like if I can survive that, I can survive this.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
During the season, because I feel like, I mean, just the mazes you're talking about, or the houses you're talking about that you were in, like us as fans, we see them as like La Llorona was like, that was like a banger, and then, the bride, the that house specifically, I feel like a lot of people have it ranked really, like, not even just that year, like overall,
Yeah.
like throughout the years they've been going, like it's I want to say like top three for me, and I've been going for about a decade now. um when you guys are doing your run through with this house, and the season's going on, like, do you guys hear the hype behind your houses, and does that put like any added pressure on you, like, oh man, like our house is like, people really like our house, like we got to go all out? Or, I mean, obviously you're going, I know you guys go all out anyway, but is there any added pressure knowing that, man, people really are like, they like our house?
Absolutely. I actually remember feeling so terrified when I started as the Bride of Frankenstein that year.
Oh,
Because he's like
okay.
the horror icon for a lot of that female
Right,
horror
right.
base. And when we did our first rehearsal and seeing how beautiful the maze was, I think I kind of instantly knew that it was going to be well received. And so even though it didn't rank obviously scariest of the year, because it really was more of the beauty of being able for the bride to
Right,
finally have
right.
her own story, that you felt it. You felt it as the season went on. You felt it when guests came through, when you would see in
Hmm.
their eyes, and then even post after. I hear so many people talk about the Bride of Frankenstein Lives and La Llorona, that it was held
Yeah.
so in high remarks for them. La Llorona was a different hurdle of fear because it was here. It was 2012. It originated, and it was so well received, and it had such an
Right.
impact that it's kind of for the past few years led the Latin America little corner over there of like making that tradition go, especially
Yeah.
in like Southern California, where a lot of people can identify with that story. They've heard that story, they know it well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Um,
my grandma threatened me with that story,
yeah,
like, all the time.
exactly. And so that was a little bit more nervous to go into because also it was a complete 180 from Bride of Frankenstein. She wasn't helping push the story. She was the scare. La Llorona was the scare. She was
Yeah,
the one you were
okay.
scared of. So it was a completely different experience from also guest interaction. Um, Way more guests get defensive and they try to play around because they're scared. Whereas that wasn't something I felt as heavily my first year.
Right.
But it was a little worrisome of, in our rehearsal, John Murdy talked about how beloved this house was, how it ranked so high for so many people over the years, and that he had always been really hesitant to bring it back because of how beloved it was. Um, and so to do it and know that it was well received, and every week in our pre-shifts, they have statistics of what houses are ranking the highest amongst fans in like guest surveys and satisfactions. And La Llorona ranked number one almost every week, and it was to know
Nice.
that that work was being well received, and it was being heard, and also like the I think the most interesting part about scare acting from a performing standpoint, you get the reaction right there. You know if you nailed it, you know if you didn't, you know
Yeah.
how it went.
Hmm.
And when you would drop people, when you have people crying, when you have people falling into things, it's a pretty clear like, okay, I think I'm doing my job.
Yeah, yeah.
I,
And the
I think
makeup,
people forget like there's so many different icons and stuff in the horror industry. Like you have your Michael Myers, you have your Freddy Kruegers, but then you have, like you said, the icons who kind of embrace the beauty of everything. And in the Bride of Frankenstein and La Llorona, who's not even like an icon in the horror scene, but as far as like folklore and everything and the Latin
Yeah.
America stories,
yeah,
is really an icon. And it just goes back to like powerful woman. It's awesome to see. And I mean, we saw that with Eternal Bloodlines this year too.
yeah. Yeah, I think also then coming back to Eternal Bloodlines was also a little jarring, like a little scary,
Hmm.
knowing how beloved the Bride of Frankenstein lives was, and knowing that that maze was held in such high regards amongst guests. Um,
Right.
Yeah.
I was pretty worrisome coming into it because knowing how high people value what that 21 maze was, to be super completely honest, it was also really interesting because it was not beloved the same way.
Hmm.
This year, it was of
Okay.
course enjoyed and loved in its own way, but it's really sequels are hard and they're hard to follow and they're hard to
Yeah.
compare, and especially when it's not a direct sequel. The Eternal Bloodlines actually takes place in the middle of The Bride of Frankenstein Lives.
Right.
Okay.
And so I don't think that is super easy for people to hear or understand because I didn't. When I went to the Midsummer Scream panel where John Murray talked about it, and that was where it was made clear to me. And also being in The Bride of Frankenstein Lives, I remember the costume that the bride was in that
Mm.
tiny little subsection of the house that's like literally one room where she's stabbing a Dracula's bride.
Yeah.
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 That's where this is taking place. It's like a subplot in that, but I don't really know how clear that was to people. So it was like I even had friends come be like, "So what? Like, what's going?" And the bride is like in this sub journey, and then you meet this brand new character, Saskia Van Helsing, who you're like, who is this? Is this
Hmm.
Chapel Roan? What we heard frequently?
I'm
Um,
sure you got. I'm sure you got
oh
that a
yeah,
lot.
oh absolutely. Chapel Roan actually came through our maze
Huh.
when we were there
Wow.
at the
Nice.
set, and that is like the highlight of my career for sure.
Is that what's in your bio?
That's
I
what's in
saw
my
that in your bio.
Instagram bio. Chaperone called me a badass because
I
she
was like, what?
did.
What the hell?
Yeah, I was in the our wood spot where
Huh.
Saskia Van Helsing is shooting a she-wolf across the way, and
Okay.
we had heard world travels fast from the upper lot all the way down to the lower lot of like
Yeah.
Chapel the park. She's in the park. She they took pictures. And I had just gone on set. Like I had maybe been on set for not even 90 seconds. And she wolf pops out. We do the scare. And I'm like, I'm actually pretty blind and I don't wear contacts usually during my haunts. So I am not the best at seeing guests. And so we're standing there. I do the shot and I hear someone say, "That's badass. You're badass." And I like just slow turn, kind of look, and I'm like, "That's Chaperone." Like I could bet money that's Chaperone. Short little girl, little bandana, covering red hair. She's like smiling, pointing, and I just like stand there like frozen for a second. Like, wait,
You're
that's
like,
her.
gotta stay in character. Gotta stay in character.
Exactly. And later in that set, in our houses we have panic buttons in case of an emergency if anything goes wrong or a guest gets too rowdy or whatever the case is, and
Okay.
halfway through the set a guest had come in through and was starting to mess with our maze monitor, our maze host who stands in the room with us,
Uh,
and got right in their face. So I hit the button. My supervisor came and pulled me off and was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I tell her the concern, and then I was like, "By the way, I think Chapel Roan came through that set." And she was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, about what time?" I was like, "I just come on. Go back on set, whatever." And the set's off, and my supervisor pulls me aside and she's like, "We pulled the footage and it's absolutely Chapel Roan. It's
That's cool.
100% is." She was like, "You
that's
better scream
awesome.
from the rooftops now."
Yeah.
So that's what my bio is because she did. But it was also interesting to hear guests' responses in real time in our current maze of Eternal Bloodlines as well, because a lot of the maze was very co-partner dependent. A lot of scenes didn't work unless
Okay.
you
Yeah.
had the entire cast. And
Right.
casting at Universal is just kind of tricky. It's kind of hard. Not every costume fits everyone. Not every mask works for everyone. I know a few nights in the beginning of our season, I had tried Dracula's Bride as one of the roles that needed to be filled, and I had an awful allergic reaction to the glue.
Yeah.
Even though it's
Yeah.
like sealed, taken care of, maintained, the our first week of Horror Nights this year was in our awful heat wave that we had in Southern California.
Yeah.
100 degrees. So
Yeah, that was awful. That was horrible.
so like the small ventilation and the sweat and the air and the moisture kind of just had a reaction. So it
Yeah.
wasn't super easy every night for everyone to fill every hole in our house, which is where I think our year this year kind of struggled a little bit. The story wasn't as concise and clear because parts of the story are missing, understandably. So it was also interesting to hear in comparison to 2021 in real time that people were confused or people weren't understanding it or it wasn't making sense. And I think knowing the full story, it's a beautiful story and it works very well. And you get the answers that you need. But of course, any story told without complete story pieces doesn't really work as well. So
Right.
especially in those beginning weeks where we were in the awful heat wave and people were getting sick and having to come off and X, Y, and Z and everything in between, it was pretty hard to hear a lot of people's reviews of it because we just had to remind ourselves that it's not the work that we were doing that wasn't making sense. It's just
Yeah.
we didn't have all the tools yet that we needed to help it make sense, unfortunately.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Very interesting. Okay, as far as I will say this, and this is just my opinion. I think with the first bride house, I feel like the story, man, and this is not me trying to like make anyone feel any kind of way, but I
Don't be a
think
bitch,
sometimes-
Rob. Say it.
Yeah. I think your casual fan doesn't do all the digging that like people who are into it do. Like your
Absolutely.
casual fan comes through, and this is why I think like maybe like because I didn't find the story confusing. I did think sometimes they were maybe actors not there. Like you're saying, it was a two. You know, you needed the whole story. You needed people there to tell the whole story, and I think sometimes maybe a person wasn't there. But for us, I really enjoyed Eternal Bloodlines. I liked them bringing in this character. I always mispronounce her name. It's Saskia, right?
Saskia, yes.
Yeah, I liked them bringing in this character. I liked the story they told, and I enjoyed it. But I did hear a lot of people being like, "Oh, I didn't get that. I didn't get
Yeah.
that." And so I think sometimes you run into when you're creating these new characters. I think sometimes you do run into like well, what's going on with your casual fan? Like, well,
Yeah.
I didn't understand this. I understand that, but I don't know. I think that's like it's a good and bad thing almost because you do run that risk of people not being understanding it because where's the movie or where's the lore and where's like the bride and her the Bride of Frankenstein. That house we know, like we knew the story, and it was I think it was told very well in that house, whereas this one you had to kind of dig a little
Yeah,
bit
I agree.
to understand the full story, if that makes any sense.
I absolutely agree. I think The Bride of Frankenstein Lives was a literal story. You walked in, the
Yeah.
facade was a storybook. You read the chapters. It was very, very clear and concise for a casual fan to follow. Whereas, if you didn't even know 2021 happened, I could understand the confusion of like, there was a little bit of digging. And I think you're right. I think it appeals to a different type of fan or a different type of audience.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah, or even if you weren't like people who went to Midsummer and saw the story, like
Yes.
well, like you have like something to base it off of. We're not Midsummer is a packed house, but not everybody goes to Midsummer
Absolutely.
who
Right,
goes
right.
to Horror Night. So
Absolutely.
I think, but with that, I feel like you guys did a really good job telling that story in Eternal Bloodlines.
Thank
Well,
you.
and I
It
kind of
was-
wanted to add on that a little bit too, because I think that a lot of people, yeah, you go to Midsummer and everything, and you understand the story, but I also think too, when some people get too invested into something, like I mean, Bride of Frankenstein Liz was highly regarded as one of the best, and then
Yeah.
like Tiffany was saying, like they're expecting something on par with that, even though just like the movies, the sequels don't always work out, and
Right.
that's just how it is. And I think that people don't really grasp the fact of like you said, the heat wave. A lot of people were having issues. They couldn't be at work. They couldn't fill that cast. So I don't think people realize that like if you're gonna go the opening weekend or if you're gonna go the first couple weeks, there's still gonna be plenty of kinks to work out. And I
Yeah.
think that's why this house ranked a lot higher. And maybe I'm biased because I love Bride of Frankenstein and everything around her storyline, but I think that people need to see it as it develops throughout the year when you get more cast and when everyone gets in the flow of things to really see the true talent come out. and see that storyline be developed through the actors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we say every season it breaks our hearts when media is on the first night, because
Yeah.
it's just not, every YouTube video you ever see is just not what it ends up being. Every
Yeah.
year that I have my friends or I give my comps, I always make it for the end of the season. I make it when we found our flow, when we know what we're doing, and also like feeling more confident in the role itself. It takes a while to get the flow and understand how you feel in this.
Yeah.
And even like in the last week, you'll make developments and you'll be mad that you didn't make them 8 weeks ago. And so it is hard when a casual guest, yeah, why would they think about those things? They're just here to have a good time. They're going to get a little drink. They're going to
Exactly,
get a
yeah.
little scared. It's going to be a good time. And yeah, if that digging isn't done, and especially I think too, sequels in general, like you said, Scott, are just kind of hard in terms of people come in with this expectation and their creative freedom themselves. They're like, oh, I wish the story was this, or I thought it was going to be like this.
Right.
But it was also exciting to get this new character. A lot of people know of Van Helsing, and they're like, wait, who's Saskia? What does this mean?
Yeah.
And so that was also fun to get to play a character that was new for me. The Bride of Frankenstein, she is someone that we know. La Llorona, we know of her. Bloody Beth from Evil Dead Rise is literally based off a movie. And so to get to play a completely brand new character was a lot of fun freedom I was extremely grateful for, because you got to play and make a lot of those choices really well. And our show quality worked with us to give us that general direction and kind of plant that seed, but then allow us to kind of do what we needed to do, which is why there's 2 casts of every night. We rotate every 45 or hour off. And a lot of times we as a cast go through our own maze. And it's nice to get to see what another person makes as a creative choice in your same exact role.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And I will say, to give you your flowers, you were a badass.
Thank you.
I think that you, from the multiple times I've seen you over the years, you really know how to bring your characters to life. And some people struggle with that. Some people just want to be there to scare. But then there's people who like really are good at bringing that character out. And I think that shows with the different actors, because everyone's talented. But then you have the actors who really know how to bring that character out. And especially with an original character like Saskia, you really have to tap in your creative freedom there.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, I also think too, and this like kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about house characters and streets characters. I think streets characters are out there just to purely like they're gonna scare you, whereas house characters, there's a story to be told. Like and there's stories to be told on streets and in houses, but they're told different ways. Whereas, like I said, the streets they're just out scare you, get you to run, go that way, scare this person. Whereas the house, monsters, they're in there and they're not so much boxed in, but they got the story to tell, and they have to, in their best way, tell this story and hit these people in a few seconds, and then the next group. So definitely I didn't this is also I used to typically go a couple times a year. I only went the media night this year, the opening night. So I'm like kicking myself for that, because I like to see, like you're saying, the progression of when the first day to the last day, in the middle, things change so much. But just off videos and everything, like again, that I really enjoyed that house so much. It pains me that not everyone appreciated it the way it should have been.
Yes.
So, but you guys killed it in there.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think the streets characters are so appreciative, we're so appreciative of, because they're going to set the tone. They're going to start the night off. They're going to get those guests in that mindset of what the scare is going to look like, what their night's going to feel like. And then coming into those houses, it's our job to kind of bring that immersion that they're expecting, or whatever they're not expecting. Hopefully we can get them expecting things sometimes. But and that's how we get some crazy guest experiences for sure when they're unexpected. But yeah, no, it was so interesting because I also had quite a few friends come through the season, and some of them would walk away and instantly know. They would get the story. They were like, "Oh yeah, it was clear. I got it." Like they were picking up what we were putting down, and then sometimes even down to the hour, you just come in at an unfortunate time. Like, you unfortunately are following a group of guests who felt compelled to touch every scare actor in this maze.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to
Yeah.
have a walkthrough that really is going to be a little empty and not really make complete sense, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of. I was gonna say like to based on my next question, was that like a common issue because you guys are all female cast? You have the creeps who just want to be idiots. Was that like a common issue?
Yes. We had quite a few guest incidents. And when I talked to security a few times for my incidents that I had been through,
Mm.
I had a security guard say that our house had all of the house's incidents combined and more. We
It's crazy.
Guests get
I
brave.
hate that. It makes you pissed off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in primarily almost all female houses every year, except for Evil
Yeah.
and Rise. We had a fair amount of male and female, which was nice.
Mm.
But yes, we had a lot of guests. They just feel brave. They get compelled to try things, especially in a maze like Eternal Bloodlines, where it wasn't like Insidious, where it's like back to back to back scare. In
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you're following our story and you're getting scared. You get brave. They feel confident. They feel comfortable. They think they know what's coming next.
Hmm.
And when there's any level of intoxication or a group of teenagers with their friends around, hyping them up, that bravery kind of gets compelled. And it's hard. Sometimes it does have a mental impact of some nights you have a perfect night. You've nailed it. You did great. Awesome. And other nights it just feels like back to back to back guests
Yeah.
putting their
Yeah.
hands in their face, trying to grab you, trying to yell at you. Saskia, surprisingly to me, was a role that I had, I think, in my 4 years. No, probably Bride, but one of the
Mm.
least mean commentary said at her. Um,
Okay.
yeah, La Llorona, she got some words thrown at her.
And I'm sure she got some Spanish words too.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh for sure. Whereas Saskia, it was a lot of guests knew that they were rooting for her in the story. So it
Yeah.
was a lot of guests, for the most part, I felt in my experience being like, yeah, girl, get him, get that wolf,
Yeah.
get that Dracula. And also it was really satisfying to see a lot of guests make that connection too of what the story
Mhm.
was in front of them. So I found that I had a lot of good verbal guests. It was a lot of physical, unfortunately, male guests that would feel confident. The worst that I had was a guest was I was in the room called a throne room, where you were
Mhm.
looking at Dracula's daughter in her
Mhm.
coffin, and you'd be distracted looking at her, and Saskia pops out behind you and stabs a Dracula dummy and goes across and jolts at you. And this man was very like taunting of Dracula's daughter, and he was so focused he didn't see me coming, so I scared him really bad. And he came into my hide after and screamed at me and tried to like,
That's crazy.
Wow.
and it of course startled me so bad because I was like, these hides are not that big in comparison. And I
Yeah.
think,
So it's like when you have a grown man coming in and
yeah, like, sir, we
Yeah.
need you to
screaming at you.
step back real quick.
Yeah.
And so it was only incidences like that it would remind me of like some of those nights are hard. Some of those nights guests just feel confident. They just feel compelled. They just get brave.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's
And I
usually
think it's
though only from
a
good
reminder
scares.
to everyone. Like,
Oh yeah.
if you keep doing stuff like this, and I want to say like it's not everybody. It's a
No,
small group of people,
it
but it
is.
does add up and it does take a toll on the actors. And
Yeah.
if stuff like this happens, not only are they going to put restrictions like, no
Yeah.
Yeah.
alcohol, they're going to put restrictions like they can't do an all-female house, which was all freaking badass with La Llorona
Yeah.
and Eternal Bloodlines. But it's not going to make the event fun for anyone. And also,
Yeah.
like, just be human. You know what I mean?
I
Well,
think often
also,
people dissociate so hard that this is not a
yeah.
person in front of you and they just
Yeah, yeah.
that.
Well, yeah, they feel. I feel like sometimes they might, like what you're saying. It's not a person, but also too, it's like, uh, I feel like when I'm generalizing here, we're so used to having our phones in front of us, and
Yeah.
that's like a disconnect where it's like, oh, this person's not real. They're on my phone, like kind of thing like that, where I feel more emboldened to do stupid things, which
Yeah.
is never okay. Yeah, that's tough. One thing with that, I will say, or I want to ask, like, is it like a snowball effect? Do you feel like oh, it's one incident and then it's kind of like that's it for the night, or do you feel like there's nights where it's like it's just one after another? I think, like how on
Yeah,
nights like that.
it definitely it varies on the night. I've had nights where it's like one
Okay,
and done, but honestly, that one and done will set a mindset. Any guest now that comes through,
right,
trust every guest that comes through now. I'm a little hesitant towards,
right,
and so it is. You have to really actively work to turn that mindset off and continue to take a breath. Every year that
Hmm.
I've been in, for the most part, the supervisors have been really good about take a breath, let's reset, let's try again. If that means we have to take a couple seconds off, okay. Um,
right.
there are some nights though, and it's usually Fridays that guests feel
There's a day.
there's a day. Shockingly though, it's a mix. Fridays and Saturdays are like the most compacted, busy nights. So it
Yeah,
feels really guests are coming through constantly, and
Right.
you can get caught off guard, and it'll snowball from there. I've found
right.
though, and every year that I've worked this event, as Horror Nights expands their calendar every year, um, the Wednesdays and the Thursdays, the cheap ticket nights for some reason, they're really low
Mm,
um, in guests coming through. So you do
hmm.
sometimes get those gaps and breaks, and guests don't see the scare coming.
Yeah.
And that's when those incidents kind of snap back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
And then they
Um,
feel comfortable because there's not a lot
yeah,
of people around them either.
Yeah.
You know?
exactly. So we would always be like, all right, guys, it's a Thursday. Be careful out there. But yeah, it would definitely also it only takes one fairly big incident to make every little incident feel like an incident.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
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 so
Okay.
like one guest trying to hit you in the face is gonna set the tone for every guest that comes through and like pretends to like jump at me is going to be like a stone cold face for me. Like we're not playing this game
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah.
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 Especially because we're told so frequently that if a guest is messing, we have monitors in our hides. If a guest is messing around, don't come out. Don't give them a show.
Yeah.
Do not give them what
Yeah.
they're
That's
looking to
good.
start a
That's
fight.
good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So often too, it's a control of watching and being able to read people's body languages and their demeanor.
Yeah.
And sometimes some nights it's just like, wow, I'm not coming out for anyone. You all are acting like fools. And other nights, guests are so well behaved and they're so appreciative, and you scare someone and they clap and they're like, yeah, great job.
Yeah.
So it can snowball, but I think it's all about mindset. Some nights it's just harder. This past season,
Yeah.
I worked 69 days in a row between both of my jobs, um, consecutively. So we were trailing
Wow.
day 50, and I was like, enough. Any guest that's like trying to joke at me, I'm not in the mood. Um, Whereas on day 4, I'm a little more like lenient of like, okay,
Yeah.
probably an accident. They bumped into me. Okay, fine. But it's really a big mindset game of trying to keep that positive mentality. And you don't want to always think bad of the guests. They're not all
Right.
that
Right.
way.
Right. Right.
Not every guest that comes through Halloween Horror Night leaves their brain at the turnstile. Majority of them want to be scared and they want to have fun.
You're like, this
Right.
plastic weapon's about to turn into a real weapon real quick.
Oh, that's always a crazy. I've had a weapon, 2 of my 4 years. And why are you trying me? I have a massive chainsaw in my
You're like,
hand.
watch out.
Like I have a chainsaw and this blade is wooden. Like it was quick bonk. Like I don't know why we're compelled to come at the
Just be
girl.
like,
Yeah,
oops.
that's what I'm saying. Why are we especially with this chainsaw? Because it was so big. I was like, you see what's happening. Like all it would take is for me to
People are
accidentally hit
brave.
you.
Yeah.
Which
Especially
is crazy
when they get that
because
liquid courage.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I was gonna say it's a liquid courage. But I don't know. Maybe I'm biased here. Rob, you've seen me. I drink.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like, is there ever a time I'm like that going into the
There's
freaking
no,
haunt?
never, no,
Like, I
never.
don't know.
But
I can't speak for everyone, but maybe there's
it's
just a common sense. You know what I
I will
mean?
speak for everyone, and I take the privilege in doing that. This is the difference, is that you have respect for the art, the
Yeah.
theme
Yes.
park.
Yes.
You have a different mindset where it's like
Yeah.
even though I've seen you get scared, I've watched you get scared, and your reaction isn't to punch or swing birds. We have people who come in I say we like I work there. When you have people who come in who they're just like, oh, I'm gonna get wasted. I'm gonna go in there and oh, no one's gonna scare me.
Yeah, I'm gonna swing on them.
I'm a tough guy. I'm gonna swing on a little tiny person
Yeah.
who's half my size, but I'm a tough guy. So you have those people who are already in their mindset before they even come in the park.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That no one's gonna scare me. So I can't even put you with them. And I will say this, and this is to fans: don't be stupid, because then like you're in you go in your box and you don't scare anyone, but then you have those people who are like have a bad experience and they don't come back, and we lose good actors and actresses and just we lose good characters who would have stayed if some idiot didn't try to punch them or grab them or touch them. So just as fans, when you go through there, don't be stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, in my second year as La Llorona, every year I've had like one major incident of the season that's like okay, this was the most that I was pushed to. In La Llorona, guest punched me in the face, and it was completely intentional. They watched the footage. The lady knew where my hide was. She just punched the window in, got me right in the cheekbone.
Damn.
And thankfully, my first year of Bride of Frankenstein was so amazing that I was able to put that aside. But I do think if that had been my first year, would I have been compelled to? Would I?
Yeah,
have
you
felt as
probably would have been like,
comfortable to put
damn, this is
myself in
not
that?
fun.
Exactly, yeah. Would I
Yeah.
have felt as comfortable to put myself through that again? Who's to say? And it's definitely, I have so much compassion for those people. I work at Disney as my other job, and often get people ask me like, oh, I could never do that. I get so scared. I put my fists up, and I tell them every time, don't come. If you know as like a reactive person, your instinct is
You
to
swing.
or swing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
totally fair. Just don't be near me. Like, just
Yeah.
do your thing. And so then adding that level of alcohol to the mix, I think people think that will help them, that they won't feel as scared, or they'll like blow it off, or it's fine, or whatever. But I mean, as the guest who came in 2018, I knew I wasn't a reactive person. I knew I was a crier. I was going to cry. And so,
Which is what the actors love,
which is what we want. I'm happy that I cried for them in 2018. But yeah, it's also definitely like talking to people just in life, and it's putting that perspective of them of like, oh yeah, please don't come in my maze and hit me. Thank you so much. That'd be so appreciated.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of flip it on a positive role.
Yeah.
I like that you kind of open up about all that, but I kind of want to flip it on a positive note and kind of ask you what you think your dream role would be, as far as like if you were to pick a house or a TV show or a movie that Horror Nights would be bringing a couple years from now, what would be your dream role of that?
That is a great question. I've never thought about that. Every year I think I just go in so blindly, and I go off the spec maps, and I just kind of hope for the best, because we're also
you're like, I wanna do
speculating
that
with
one.
you guys.
Yeah.
We're also locking in and hoping.
Yeah.
I
That's
think,
funny.
yeah, I think not even as a dream role per se, but I would love to see a Scream house. Scream is my favorite franchise. Yes. And to be in that in any capacity would be amazing. But then there's also just some that like horror that we see that comes out like that would just be fun to see. Like Five Nights at Freddy's is a big one that people talk about for the past couple of years, and it would just be so fun to see how that happens, how they are able to pull some of that off. That's being involved in that in any way. Five Nights at Freddy's is not my specific, but it's a big one that I'm like, a lot of these projects and pieces that they talk about, I'm also just as curious to see how they're going to do it. And I think when the year
think
comes
like you
when I
don't even
come
have to be a
back, I'll
fan of
definitely
it.
go
You can
see.
just like, like you said, you're curious about it. Like that's I think that's a lot of movies. Like for me, like I like Terrifier, but I don't do the over the top horror stuff. Like I can't do the gore.
I agree.
But it's definitely something that I'd be like, how would they pull that off? Like seeing art
Exactly.
all over the place, you know?
No, I absolutely agree. I think that's one that, same thing, not my cup of tea, more power to you. But I would be super interested to see how they pull it off.
So with you mentioned Scream. If they ever did bring a Scream house, what would you? Because as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, like I feel like you could be like a ghost face, but is there some like, do you want like like a specific role? Like, what would be your role in that house?
That's a great question. I I guess Ghostface can be anyone because like
Right.
it's not necessarily just Billy and Stu that we see in the first one. They don't need to be these tall men that are
Yeah,
running around.
there's no real
Be
requirement for
anyone.
Ghostface, really.
Exactly. That I don't know. I think in my time, I only reason I don't know if I'd ever be in a scream house is a lot of it I imagine would be victim actors, which I respect
Okay.
them
Yeah.
so much and all that they do, because they're just getting killed over and over and over, and I think that would maybe drive me a little mad. But yeah, to be a female Ghostface would be fun. That would be really exciting. Um, yeah, I think that is one that I would definitely just want to see, even if that was like a female version of a ghost face.
Yeah.
That would probably be one that I would like to do. I also think I would like to be in another role, maybe where I was equally as scary to La Llorona again. I don't know if that's possible,
Oh,
but
okay, yeah.
but it's a very different fun to be able to help tell the story like Saskia or the Bride of Frankenstein versus getting to be the scare as like La Llorona.
Mhm.
Okay.
So yeah, I think I don't know, I'm kind of open to it every year. I'm kind of along for the ride, along for the journey.
And I mean, that's a great mindset to have too. It's like I'm open. I'm open. So whatever it is that you're gonna give me, I'm gonna work with it
Yeah,
and go. That's a great mindset to have.
absolutely.
I'm sure it makes it a lot easier on casting too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the only thing that I learned this past year was I don't think I can do masks with that allergic reaction. I had never been in a
Yeah.
situation
Oh,
to
okay.
try it
Yeah.
before. And so
Uh,
every year I'd always put like, yeah, I'm open to it, why not? But
yeah.
this year I'm like, ooh, that kind of burns. That was maybe not my
And that's not an uncommon thing. So many people
yeah.
have that issue. It's just how
Mhm.
it is, and that's why a lot of stuff gets pulled. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's at least you tried it, and you can say that you tried it.
Yeah. I'd also like to see there's like a lot of projects that I feel like have been talked about in the past that have been scrapped. I'd like to see
Mm.
how like Hollywood would do a Beetlejuice maze because we saw Florida,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that was a rumor that we were supposed to have and got scrapped or cut however close into the process. So I
mm,
think it's also I'd love to see Horror Nights do a lot of those pieces that are either so fan speculated or have been cut in the past due to X, Y, and Z reasons.
yeah,
That I think I'd also like to see how they pull some of those things off and how even when you compare Hollywood to Orlando, like our stories are the same but can also be told very differently. Like
oh
Right.
yeah.
in
The
Orlando,
Eternal Bloodline story in
yes,
Orlando was so different,
so
but it worked
different.
really good.
Yes. Um, Over here in Hollywood, we frequently talked about the fact that Orlando had a she-wolf on a zip line.
Yeah. Dude,
Hello?
I don't know,
What
like
is
if you watch any
in?
videos, but there's a scene, and like this is one of our, I think it was one of our first houses that we did in Orlando, but there's a scene where you walk in and like Saskia's up on like this giant cabin, and then across the way on another giant cabin is the bride.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
In our house, we are all on the ground.
Yeah,
Nobody's up high. We are all grounded. But then to see that it's the same story told so differently from each other, that
yeah,
I think it would be fun to see like some of those things that we haven't had here that get told in a different light.
yeah,
But yeah, it was crazy to see that our stories were so different from each other. Like, yeah, them being up high or like just the way the story was told. They had rooms that we didn't have and vice versa.
hmm,
That I think it's always interesting to see and compare. And I think in the pandemic before I'd ever done Horror Nights, it was something I never pondered. I never thought about the fact that
yeah,
there were two different Orlando and Hollywood doing the same thing but completely different from each other. But now it's something I think about. So I'd definitely be
yeah,
interested to see how they can pull maybe some of those pieces off that they haven't had to get their own take on.
yeah.
Nice.
Rob, I wanted to ask my scare actor question, and then if you want to do your favorite questions at the end.
Yeah.
All right, so we've been doing now recently. By the way, breaking news, everybody! I haven't even told Rob about this, but this will be
Oh
the
no.
first episode going on Spotify. So
Nice.
Ooh,
Nice. We're
woohoo!
doing it.
Yeah,
We're
we're doing
doing
it.
it.
I haven't got all the kinks worked out, but like it's gonna happen because I know people have talked to me like it'd be way easier just to listen to it in the car. I'm like, yeah, you're right, whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah,
um,
whatever.
So anyway, so we've been doing this thing where we ask each guest to ask their question for the next guest. So from Bella, who was our last guest, she asked to describe your first year or your first day of scare acting.
Oh, okay. My first day of scare acting in 2021 was nerve-wracking. Getting into a full prosthetic for the first time ever, getting into this iconic wig, finding out how the house's layout is backstage is also really difficult. So I definitely got
Mhm.
lost a few times trying to find my
It was an actual maze.
It's an actual maze back there. Um, and yes, my first set was in our cottage room, which was hard to get into because we had a light up cross that you'd have to wire all the way through your bodysuit. So trying to
Ooh.
figure that out, me and my supervisor, we were like, "What is this? I don't know." And going in and feeling so nervous. It was the first time performing since I'd graduated college, and feeling so anxious about what it would be. And I'll never forget my first guest that came through. Were not wearing their masks, but had the biggest smiles on their faces. And they were like, yeah, yeah, get him. Because the Frankenstein dummy is laying on the bed in front of me,
Right.
legless.
Yeah.
So clearly trying to help him. And it felt like in an instant, all my nerves just went away. And it made so
Nice.
much sense.
The rest is history.
The rest is history. Here we are.
So what question do you have for a future guest? I don't know who our next guest is, but a future guest in the haunt world. What would be
Okay.
your next question?
What is a franchise that you don't want to see anymore at haunts? You're good with. You've had your
I like
fill.
that.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I like that question a lot.
Yeah.
I can say
It's
mine.
been
Texas
done.
Chainsaw Massacre.
I agree. No more meat smell.
I'm
Please.
sorry. I
No
mean, you
more.
followed me for a couple years now, but I'm very vocal about. I'm very unpopular with my HHN opinions.
Yeah, no more. No
But
more
I
meat
feel like a
smell.
lot of people think that, and they're just too afraid to say it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, man, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't want to. I would say The Purge.
That's
Yeah. The only difference with the Purge is the Purge can just work anywhere. It can work in a maze,
Yeah.
it can work in a
It's
scare
easy.
zone, it can work in Terror Tram.
Yeah, it's very. You can put it throughout the. You could do a whole event around The Purge.
The
Yeah,
Purge was actually the maze in 2018 that I was like, I don't want to do this. This is too much. It's too real. No thanks.
I think that one was the first Purge, I'm pretty sure.
I was like, we're good. I don't want to do this. And I get in there. I was like crying. Straight face crying, looking at these scare actors, being like,
They were probably honored. They were probably like, wow,
Yeah.
she thinks we're so good.
Wait, wait, this isn't my question, but this just popped in my head, so I want to know, like, maybe you don't because you're so busy. Are you still crying? Like, do you get to go through the mazes or the houses, and do you still cry?
yeah, yes. Yeah,
Sorry, that's hilarious.
every
I'm sorry.
every year, our supervisor teams try to work really hard to make sure that we get the opportunity to go through the houses, and yeah, I like mask up, sunglasses up, covering whatever costume pieces can be, and whatever friend is around me, usually my friend Megan, is unfortunately getting like the death grip of life. And our entire friend group is like, you got this, you're so brave. And of course, like when we go through the houses, we like rotate the order of like who's going in first, who's going in last, who's grouping up with who, and consistently. I have gotten better. I don't think I cried at any maze this year,
Okay.
but I do scream and I do like shrivel. I get really small, and there are definitely some mazes that I don't want to see. I did not see Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I did not want to see it. I didn't want to smell it. I didn't want to know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That's
the
like
smells.
Savannah's the
smells.
same way. Like it took her like a lot of bravery to go through that because she's like, I can't do the smells, I can't do the gore. Like I can't. Like she even when she had like alcohol in her system, she's like, that house is like, I don't want to do it.
It's just
Well,
super valid. Yeah.
I will say the Exorcist house, not the Believer, but like the
Oh,
Exorcist.
yeah.
My wife went through that. I think it was 2016. My wife went through that house, and because of that house, she has not gone back. to Horror Nights.
Because of
She's
how
like,
delicious smells and everything.
Because of the smells. She's like,
Yeah.
I'm not, like, this is done. I'm not ever coming
Yeah.
back to this place again. So, yeah, those can be traumatizing.
I think if I remember correctly, in 2021, going through Halloween, Michael Myers, that guy's scary. That's a
Yeah.
big guy. That's
and
a big
and
guy
they
with a
specifically
knife.
cast like 6,
Yeah.
7 dudes.
Yes,
Like they're
absolutely.
super tall.
One of my friends was Michael Myers that year, and I still don't forgive him. I'm like, no, that's too frightening for me. Thank you so much. I've done my best, and I try really hard to be braver now. But I think when the year comes where I don't do it anymore, and I come back as a guest to see all my friends, I think I'm right back at square one of 2018. I think not knowing what to expect will keep me on my toes. Especially, I watch the video. I'm such a chicken. I watch the videos before we go through every year. I want to know what's going on.
So you know where all the jump scares are.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm still a scaredy cat for sure. But it's made it a little less scary.
You're growing. Yeah.
When you look La Llorona in the mirror in a pool party at Horror Nights, you
and then you put your
unlock a
hand on
level.
your face and you're like, wait a second, that's me.
Wait,
Yeah.
that's me. Exactly.
It's empowering. All right. So the hard-hitting question I have today
Okay.
is,
Locked in.
now the world has fallen apart
Okay.
and zombies roam the world. What is your go-to zombie killing weapon?
Zombie killing weapon. That is a great question. I don't think I would survive a day in a zombie apocalypse. So I
There'd
would
be too much crying going on.
exactly.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of crying.
Just
a lot of
I'd
crying.
be dehydrated. I would just be just fresh out of tears at that point.
Unless she got to dress up as like La Llorona
And
or like
scare
Saskia
back.
or something, then she'd be more empowered. So you're dressed up
Oh, yeah.
and you're ready to kill.
Saskia embodied, the confidence was there. Tiffany, no, not there. I would probably say a baseball bat,
Okay,
just to be
nice.
safe. I feel like
Nice.
you could poke people with it, you can hit people with it, you can
Yeah.
aim for kind of any body part. The only worry with a baseball bat is you just should be kind of in close proximity, which I don't think I would love. But
Yeah.
definitely, I would say that's probably the safest for me, at least.
Okay.
I would hope.
Okay. I like
For
that.
my
That's a
1
good-
hour
that's a-
in the zombie
that's a good-
apocalypse. Yeah.
for my 30 minutes that I'm surviving.
For my 30 minutes. No, absolutely. Especially
Just to take out my rage.
exactly in where Evil Dead Rise was is where the Walking Dead experience once was, which traumatized me as a child. A lot of that stuff is still back there. It's
It's
Oh wow.
equally as scary back there as it is in that
Like nuts.
spot.
that was like, so I toured that one. I think I toured Evil Dead and the horror hotel, which was there
Yes.
before. And Murdy was like, yeah, that wall is from Walking Dead, that wall's from Walking, and I was like, damn, you can see the paint, and I'm sure you saw, you can see the paint from the Walking Dead on the floor.
Yeah,
It was
the
so
blood marks,
freaking
yeah.
weird.
In that maze, we the Bloody Bets had to get ready. Their makeup had to get done downstairs in a room we called the blood room, which was just covered in tarp because our blood was just everywhere. And it was behind a part of the maze that used to be a part of the hospital. You see like the screens where the zombies would hit their hands, and the blood prints that are on the floor in the cages and stuff. It reminded me how much I am not a fan of zombies. Because it's equally as spooky back there as it was.
It was
Walking Dead.
crazy. Yeah, that whole, like, a lot of people don't know this, and I've been fortunate enough to see a bunch of that stuff in that building. But that building is kind of creepy.
Oh, it's haunted.
Like,
it is absolutely
there's like
haunted.
layers to that building that you're like, whoa.
It's so haunted. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. It's
But Tiffany,
cool.
we thank you for coming on. We
Of
appreciate you
course.
spending your morning with us, and you're awesome.
Thank
you're
you so
awesome at
much. You guys
everything
are both
do,
amazing. Thank you for having me. Thanks for doing what you're doing, keeping us on our toes every Halloween season, reporting live from the scene for the scaredy cats like me out there. I take your guys' opinions as it is, because
as it is,
I won't be the one seeing it. So I'm like, yep, they're right. They know they said it for sure.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. That has been episode 22 of the Haunt Talk podcast. My name is Scott.
And I am Rob.
And we have been Haunt Talk. We'll catch you guys in the next ones. Peace out, everybody.